Good morning, everyone. Terrific. Third time's a charm. Okay, so any feedback on how the course is going? How are people finding it? That's a good sign. Anything that could be improved? Better than I expect. I love it when people say that. Okay, great. All right. Please let me know. I try to treat these things a bit like a retrospective. That's why I ask you guys how it's going. Okay, okay, thanks, Max. It's feedback upon feedback upon feedback. It can drive you nuts sometimes. Yes. So what do you think of our feedback mechanism? All right, a couple of things. The exam, I'm sure you guys are interested in the exam, and I was going to do that at the end, but I think I might do it at the beginning instead. So let me just... All right. So you guys can see that? Okay. So the mid-semester test, it's a test really, because it's not, I hate the word exam, to be honest, is basically, I'm going to make it 1 hour long to keep it short. I'll give people extra time if they need it. I'm not going to be fussed, so it'll probably be, I might do 1 hour and 20 minutes or something like that. But I'm designing it to be 1 hour long and give a little bit extra time, but everyone gets the same amount of time. So it'll probably be 1 hour and 20 minutes just to give people extra reading time and understanding time, because we're not all the same in our English. Is that all right with everyone? Cool. All right. Because we don't do the NTech thing anymore. So why don't I just give everyone the extra time, and then everyone has, that's what I think anyway. All right. So short answer questions. I'll ask you something like, why shouldn't the product owner and Scrum Master be the same person? There will be quite a few questions that will ask you to refer to the stuff you did in the workshops. So you need to pull your workshop information out. So what I mean is, it could ask a question like, let me think of an example. The Scrum Master is used to keep the team moving without being a boss. Can you give an example from your workshop of how they were able to do this? Does that make sense? So I make sure the people who put effort into the workshops can use that in their exams. There'll be quite a few questions that I'll have that'll refer to the work you've done in the workshops. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is a terrible question, but let me rephrase it. Scrum Masters. What is the purpose of a Scrum Master in a team? And give an example from your workshops how they enacted that. Does that make sense, Ala? Yep.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Cool, terrific. Did I say your name properly?
Oh, yes, yes.
Terrific. All right, cool. The main reason I want to do is I see you guys putting so much work in, so I want to make sure that that is reflected in your exam mark as well. So, it'll be a lot of things like give an example from the workshop type things. I also use the lectures, the readings, and the videos. Anything that I link to from the course page that I asked you to read, and you might notice that I didn't ask you to read a lot, and that was intentional, and I didn't ask you to watch a lot of video, because I wanted to make sure that the stuff I did get put up there, the stuff that I did put up there, people did actually read. So I'll get to that in a second. In fact, it's on the slide if you read to the bottom. Okay. Okay, what else? I want to test your understanding of concepts, understanding of what Agile is. And I mean, Agile is in the Scrum style Agile that you learned in this course. Okay. And I want it to be straightforward to people who were doing everything and engaged in every workshop and actually understood what was going on. Okay. That's my aim, is to make it straightforward to those people. Yes, yeah, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do both. I'll bring some pre-printed exams, and then everyone else can use their laptops. If you don't trust your laptop battery, I don't use your laptop, because I don't want people to do half laptop, half paper, because it'll make it hard for us. Okay. What else? It'll be in session 2. How many? I don't know how many questions. Sorry, I haven't finalized that. I'm still writing them up. I've got to write enough exam questions for 4 exams. Now, is it going to be in the room we use for our practice? Yes, yeah. If I can, what I'm going to do is try to use the room next door as well, just to spread people out, but I'm not sure if the room's available. Okay. And the second, shifting it to the session. No, so did I say session 1? I mean session 2. There will be power. I mean, the power ones that drop down from the ceiling in both rooms, but it's kind of first come, first served. Yeah, if someone wants to do that, I'm not allowed to supply them. I thought of doing that, but apparently we can't do that. But if someone else brought one, yeah, but it won't be. You cannot do power boards on power boards. That's illegal. Okay. Yeah, that's why their houses burn down at a higher rate. All right. What else is there? Any other questions about the exam? Is this pretty straightforward? You come, you sit down, we'll have the tables lined up. Come sit down, do the test, and that's it. You're done with the Agile stuff for me. And there's no more assessments other than that on this section of the course. So when you come back after that, long break, you won't have to try and think back to all the specifics you did 6 weeks before that. And this was the intention, was to try and finish it in this 5 weeks. That way you can go into the studio if you're doing that. Yes, it will be definitely easier than an open book exam. If this was an open book exam, I'd get you to write an essay. I don't know, maybe 20 questions. I don't know. Don't hold me to it. I need to sit down and think about how long this will take people to do. Any information on what we should expect from the studio session? Okay, so Andy and I work closely on the 2 courses. And the idea for this course is I take you through all the skills that you need to do Scrum. And Andy's going to get you to do Scrum, like as in he's going to assume that you know everything from this course, and he's going to go, okay, I want you to set up sprint 0, which is what you've been doing, set up a sprint for next week, and then you will build something in that week and have a product increment at the end of that week, and you'll do it 3 times. So 3 weeks of sprints. I think the plan is to have, you won't have a choice on the project, but what we're trying to do is not have software development projects for networking people. So I know Grant and Andy are working together to make sure there's something specific for networking people. And I think there's a specific one for games as well. So there'll be a software, a games, and a networking one. That was the last I saw, because I saw Grant and Andy talking about it the other day. Yeah, no, we were quite conscious of the fact that we wanted the networking people to have something they could do that's a networking one, or related to network. I don't know exactly how they're doing. I know Grant had a good idea the other day, but I don't want to spoil it for you. This group, we can't take this group across to the studios unless you guys are enrolled in the same studio. If you're enrolled in the same studio, I think Andy's going to let you guys self-select, and it would be good if you could, because you've got that velocity now in this project group. But we can't rely on you being in the same studio class, so therefore it doesn't have to be the same groups. I'm sure you can shuffle around, or maybe you can't. I have to check. You'd have to check if you can shuffle around what studios you're in. It's going to be something called ITIL, from what I understand. We'll talk about that next week. I'll have more information by then. Yeah, exactly. All right. Is everyone okay? Is there any other questions about the mid-semester test? Yeah, it's a pre-requirement. Yes, it's next week on your 2nd session. Yeah, I think so. For this one, it feels like I should do that, because some of the questions I've got are much more complicated than other questions. So no. Can you hear me still? Because the internet dropped in and out for a second there. Yep, okay. I don't know. I don't know what the... Yeah. You can go early, but by the time people get in, sit down, we get everyone started, and I give extra 20 minutes. You know, by that time, the class will be essentially over. Yeah, it's mandatory to pass the exam, but I tell you what, guys, if I think that the exam's too hard, I scale upwards. So don't stress about that. So the old rule applies: be in the front of the curve, not in the back of the curve. I have to look that up. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. Any more questions? I want to talk about some stuff today without other than this. No more questions? Oh, I'm sure I'll tell Doug about that, Gemma. Who gave you PTSD? Exactly, Ika. All right. All right. Okay. Let's get into it. I haven't got a huge amount of time, so what I'm going to do is I had a section on artifacts. Okay. And I talked about I had some slides around product backlogs, but you guys know product backlogs now, right? You're super familiar with it. Yep. So just let me double check. It tracks what we want to do. Essentially, that's it, right? It's around custom collaboration over contract negotiation because it means that we've got this ongoing dialogue in what's in the product backlog, and it's about responding to change over following a plan. Oh, yes, that's right. This week, one of the pillars of Scrum is adaptability, right? Everyone agree with that? Adaptability is one of the pillars of Scrum. And yeah, oh no. So what happens is that you can sometimes have the client change the specification on you, okay? And so this week, expect there will be some change in the specification for this project you're doing. And I wouldn't be doing Andy a service if I didn't tell you that he's planning on doing the same thing. Is that one of the things we've got to get you guys used to is in Agile, you can be working your way through it, and then the client comes in and goes, oh, we need this urgently. Change all your priorities and put this in as a higher priority. Or, you know what? I know you guys spent 3 months working on this, but we don't need it anymore. Okay. So be prepared for this because this will happen. Okay. This is intentionally done in here so you get to experience it. Everyone who's worked as a software engineer knows this happens no matter actually what model of development using waterfall or agile. Okay. Yeah, the product owner will refactor it. They'll redo the business values, for example. But yeah, I'm just giving you a warning. So there will be something like that this week in this course. Okay. All right. Responding to changeover following a plan, and that's what I was talking about there. It contains the new features. We commonly call them user stories, enhancements, bug fixes. Jira calls them issues, work requirements, and we call them PBIs. So we know we're okay with that stuff. We can have a simple one, which is just user stories for small projects, but in most bigger, reasonable size projects, we actually start breaking these up into smaller ones. And I think I've given you 3 levels, right? What are the 3 levels I gave you in this one? Can anyone remember? Can anyone remember the 2 levels for a start? Epics and user stories, yep. Cool. And there's one extra level like you add this week, I think, from memory. I can't remember if you did it last week or this week. Okay. All right. Refinement, you've done that to death. No, ROI is something different. It's this week. Yeah, I thought so. Basically breaking up your user stories into smaller task items, essentially, in this week's workshops. So you have 3 levels that you had in this class. Okay. All right. So product refinement used to be called grooming. The product owner works with the team to refine the groom, the PBL. Product values, no, not quite. It's way we organize the things that we're building. So we had epics, which were groupings of user stories. We had user stories, which were specific things that the customer wanted. And then the user stories get broken down into, I think I called them items, I think, from memory. I can't remember what I called them. But there's a subgrouping as well, which is the individual components that we're building. Okay. All right. Okay, so everyone okay with the idea of grooming? And you guys have done this, like, I reckon you've done it 3 times now. So you go through and you keep updating and improving your product backlog, okay? Now, one thing, because we've done only the processes here, it feels like it's quite overwhelming, the amount of stuff that you're doing. But when you're actually doing the project, this is a very minor part of the entire workload. Does that make sense? But because we did in our workshops, we were actually doing, but you think about it, we're only spending, what is it, 4 hours per week on all this stuff together, the stand-ups, the retrospective, the all the product grooming, the just, you know, all that, those bits and pieces. It feels like it's a lot, but it's actually only 4 hours a week that we're spending on that. The rest of the time, if you're a developer, you'll be doing the actual real work. All right. Okay, so that's all right. We've done that. Sprint backlog is essentially what we take out of the product backlog, and then we're going to do in this current sprint. Is everyone okay with that? We'll talk about this a bit more in a second. I'm just trying to flip through too quickly. Okay, now the last thing, I don't think, have I talked about burn down charts yet? I don't think I have. No, okay. So there's 2 things you do on a sort of a daily basis or a weekly basis, depending how your team's set up. One is the stand-up or the daily stand-up, which is usually daily. The other thing we do is we try to keep an updated tracking of how far we've got through things. And we do that using the story points. And so what we can do is we create this chart, and Jira does it automatically for us if we update. And what we do is we start with the initial user stories that we're going to work on this sprint. And then on that user story, then we have our initial estimate, which is day 0, which is how many story points we attach to the user story. And as developers, what we do is when we've worked on it, if we think we're halfway through a 2-point user story, we put a 1 in there. Okay. And then what happens as we go through, we can actually see as our user stories are being done, we can see our workload being burnt down. And what happens is we generate a graph like this. Let me have a look here. Sorry, I'm just trying to find something. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so here's the burn down. Yeah, you do a stand up in the morning and burn down at night. Exactly. So here's an example of a burn down that I did for the screen for a screenshot somewhere, and I actually built it so it works. So here can you see this on the screen? Yep. So you can see here, there's this orange line. This is a projected like work left to do in our 10-day sprint. Okay. And so as we're working through, our programmers put stuff in, and let's say we don't get, but this -2, what do you think -2 means? It means I had to refactor something. I've accumulated some technical debt and I had to fix it. So I actually have to put more work in. Yeah, it went backwards. Yeah, exactly. So if we sort of went through here and deleted this, you see how the blue graph is now going above the line. That means that we're lagging behind in this week. And this is not for managers to beat you over the head for it. It's so the team can see how we're all doing together. And if we see something happening, we can actually sort of at some point in the middle here go, oh, we need to, like if I was the Scrum Master and I saw at day 5, I saw that graph there at day 5, what would happen is I'd go, oh, I've got a concern here. Let's have a look and see how things are going and see where the issue is. And maybe in that stand up that morning, I'd ask, what's happening with the project. Does that make sense? It's a way for the team to have visibility of what's happening. Okay, so that's what a burn down's for. Okay, there's also burn ups, which we'll cover later, and then there's another one called a velocity chart. And what happens is that this is one sprint. Let's say we got through to here, and we figured out that if we have a look down here, we've got 49 story points that we thought we could do. Okay, and at the end here, we ended up getting done 46. Okay, so what does that tell us about the velocity of our team? Looks like we're probably closer to 45 story points per sprint than 50 story points. So the next sprint, what we do is we just dropped our story points a little bit to make sure that we can get everything we promised done. Does that make sense? Yep. And then so what happens is we might have like sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, and we might say, oh, we got 46 done on that one, we got 43 done in that one, we got 46 done in that one, and we got 43 done, but we actually had time left. So let's bump that number a little bit more. This one we got 36 done. Oops. 36 done. So someone just asked me what I mean by story points. That's the amount of effort points. Yes, exactly. So the amount of effort points that we allocated at the start. Remember, we use these story points as a way of measuring how much we can get done on every sprint rather than the number of hours, because the number of hours is too specific. Yep. Cooper, yes, I can see that way, but we don't do the mindless documentation. We don't do the thing. The other thing is, this is today I log into the system and I put so for me, the amount of documentation I had to do in this one day is I had to put 3 integer values. I didn't get anything done that day. Okay, so I got to put 1 in that column, and that's it. That's all I had to do, put a 1 in one column. Okay, Cooper? So it's really just a way of, this is meant to be quick. So you put it in, sometimes the Scrum Master comes around and asks as well, but I tend to like it because we use Jira. That's too much effort, yeah. But it's just a way of making sure everyone, it's this whole idea of transparency, right? So that everything can be seen, okay? Is everyone okay with that? Cool, all right, let me switch back to the other one. Okay, so that's burn down charts example. Okay. Everyone knows what a product increment is. At the end of every sprint, you should have a reasonably complete working product that would be releasable if you chose to release it. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah. Why do we have to have it at the end of every sprint if we're not releasing at the end of every sprint?
So we can show the customer that we have something working.
Yeah. It's keep customer on side. Also means they can give you feedback, right? So they can come back and say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want, or no, it's not quite what I want, and you burn 1 sprint, not 5 sprints or something like that, right? The other thing too is, and this is a big one, is it motivates the developers, because you've got a complete product every 10 days. It means that you feel like you're achieving, and that's a big plus. Okay. And that's the other thing. Ika just said you don't have fixed random things later. Yeah, because you know you've got a fully working product. If you add something and you've got a bug in it, odds are it's the new stuff you added. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's get on to sprint planning, which I wanted to go through today. So what's sprint planning? So, you know, at the moment, we've been working our way through all these processes. Now we're up to the point where we're about to do the sprint. We're going to figure out what the hell we're going to do over the next 10 days or 20 days or 2 days or whatever it is. So it's a time box working session. So what we mean when in Agile and Scrum, when we say time boxed, it means that we're absolutely brutal in the amount of time we spend on these things. And the reason for that is we don't want, as Cooper was talking about before, there's too much documentation, is we don't want too many meetings or too much documentation. So we always talk about these ideas of time boxed. In other words, we're not spending 1 minute more than this on this process, okay? And so the general rule of thumb is 1 hour per week of sprint. So if you've got a 1 week sprint, you have 1 hour of sprint planning for it, okay? And it's a good way of doing it. You have to be absolutely brutal. Like the other one that's quite time boxed is the daily Scrum. And you're not meant to spend more than 60 seconds on what you've been doing, okay? Because otherwise it drifts and burns time, and people don't want to come because it takes too much time. Yeah, only doing what's necessary, as Cooper said. Agreement on it's about the agreement on the goal of the sprint, and really that's the core thing. And then the secondary thing is what product backlog items will support that goal. Okay, is everyone okay with that? Yep. All right, so who's there? The development team is there, and they're the ones that actually do the planning. Okay, they're the ones that figure out, how long something's, how they're gonna structure themselves for the plan. The Scrum Master's there to try and facilitate the meeting, and the product owner's there to answer questions, but not to engage in the planning. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, that's correct. Nico just said other stakeholders can attend if relevant and needed, but is rarely done. Yeah, correct. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so Scrum Master is actually Scrum Master is optional, but I've rarely seen a Scrum Master not at least attend the planning session. Okay. All right. So what do you need? You need the PBL roomed. Is everyone okay when I use these acronyms? It's easier than me saying product backlog all the time. Yep. Okay. Cool. The business value on all stories in your in your product PBL. Story points on the most important. A good definition of done, which you guys haven't quite got down yet, but that takes practice. And the idea of the velocity or an estimation of the effort available. A chairperson. What do you? Sorry, someone just asked. How is a Scrum Master different to a chairperson? Oh, you mean in the meeting? Yeah, no, not a chairperson, but you could call them a facilitator. So there's a difference between a chairperson. Chairperson controls the meeting and says, okay, we're going to move from agenda item to agenda item. A facilitator lets basically says, look, this is what we should do today. And if things are taking too long, they might nudge them into the next one. So it's a bit more of a softer version of a chairperson. Does that make sense? Yeah, and most technical people don't want to have the meeting for long, so they're pretty happy for the Scrum Master to nudge everything. Yeah, perfect. Someone said they direct the flow, but don't try to control it. Exactly. There's this idea of the servant leader, which is quite popular for Scrum Masters. The idea that, yeah, you're the leader, but you're really trying to serve the interests of your team instead of leading them. Okay, yeah, I've got to get to that in a second. Okay, so the last point on here is the idea of velocity. Is everyone okay with the idea of velocity? Okay, let me do the first question first. Okay, let's go back. Does everyone okay with the idea of velocity? Yeah, that's right. If I miss a question, please just repost it in a second, but let me finish this question first. All right, so is everyone okay with the idea of velocity? Is the idea of how fast the team can basically fulfill story points. Okay, so what happens is that last week you were trying to estimate how much you could get done. No, how much a user story costs, right? To do. So you might have had enroll in a class as one of your user stories, for example, and you said it takes 3 story points for us to get that done. Is everyone okay with that? Yep. Yep. Okay, cool. All right. So we always talk about velocity in Agile because the idea is we're not trying to wring as much work out of our workers as possible. What we're trying to do is measure how productive they are in how many story points they can do per day or per sprint. Okay. And so by measuring these things and trying to figure it out, what we do is we get an idea of team one. Sorry, I think you guys called yourself team. So team A, they have a velocity of 40 story points per sprint. Team 2 has a 45 story points per sprint. Team 6 has 36 story points per sprint. Now, this doesn't mean that their team A, B, and C are in that order of story points as being valuable members of the team, because they might have expertises that mean that their production might be slower, but they might have better quality, or they might have something else that's positive on them. It just means that that's how many story points they can generate. Does that make sense? Yep. And generally, I don't remember anyone ever sort of telling other people what your story points are. It's your internal way of measuring in the team. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why we don't do hours as well, because they become too easy to turn into a metric. Okay. So that's the velocity. And so what happens is that when we're trying to do our sprint planning, we need to roughly know how much the team can do in one sprint. Does that make sense? Yes. And the reason I said idea of velocity or an estimation of effort available, if you have a new team, you don't have any velocity calculations. You don't have that table that I did at the bottom where it had all the numbers of points that you got done on previous sprints. So you sort of have to make a rough estimation. And that's one of the things you do this week. I gave you a technique for giving an estimation for your sprint 0, essentially, to figure out how much time this team's going to take to do stuff. Okay. All right. Now, so let me scroll back up. There was a few questions in here. Max, did I answer your question? Was that you answered? Can you explain the final dot point a bit? I think you're okay with that. Yep. Okay. Darren, you're okay with what I've answered? Yeah. Someone else asked a different question. By the way, that final dot point is kind of the most important. So I'm really happy you guys asked to clarify that. That's really good. All right. And it's also one of the trickiest things to get right when you first start doing this, is like, how much can the team achieve in a sprint? Because the last thing you want to do is overpromise. And you really don't want to underpromise either, right? Because it looks like you're a bad team to the Scrum Master, or, you sort of want to try and get that right balance of saying, this is what we're capable of, so that, and you don't get stressed about it. Okay. All right. Oops, I skipped out of it. Okay. So how much time? And this is basically filling in under promise and over deliver. Yeah, I would always be a little bit towards under promising and over delivering. Don't go too far. So how do we figure out how much velocity we have? We use the history of the team if we have it, but you can only use that team. Okay, you can't say, oh, every other team does 40 story points, because it also depends on how you measure the initial user stories, because you guys are doing, you guys are a team there, and you've got a product owner, and they're doing story points. They've got a particular view on what a story, the Scrum Master and the dev team have a particular idea what a single point is worth, okay? Because remember, it's all relative. You can't say Team A's 40 is worth the same as Team B's 40 anyway, okay? And it's as I said, it's the amount that the team produces in a sprint. And you really, I can't underline this enough, you can't use the other team's velocities, because they weren't the people that sat around and said, how many story points is this user story worth? That number came from that team, right? So that's what it comes down to. All right. So rough steps, and these are, every team you join will be slightly different, but here's a example. Review the product roadmap. I'll get back to these in a second. Groom the product backlog. Decide the goal for this sprint, what user stories support that goal, and then use the data to estimate the capabilities of the team. So in other words, the velocity, and then walk through each user story with the team once you understand it. Is everyone okay with that basic set of steps? Can you see why they're all useful? So the first step is around context, of course. Yeah, I'll get to that in a sec, Max. It's on I think it's on like the next slide. Yeah. Yep. Okay, cool. All right. So we didn't cover product roadmaps too much in this course because it's sort of the next level. And it's also, I kind of modeled this course a bit on the Scrum Master course. But the product roadmap is really something a product owner generates or is given by the client. And it's really the big picture of where the company wants to take this product. And if you go look up product roadmap for just about any product line, you'll see they'll have one. There's a product roadmap for, Toyota cars. There's a product roadmap for Intel. And it's this big picture thing of where the company wants to take whatever this product is that we're building, right? It could be, if you look at Cisco, they have a product roadmap for their routers and their switches and so forth. Yeah, even video game updates. Yeah, exactly. It's the big plan, and it can have things like the vision, order of development, like what does the company think is the most important? And you can see how that then feeds into our business value for our user stories, right? It's starting from the big picture and feeding its way down into which user stories do we need to do first to support that product roadmap. And a lot of company structures and everything are around this sort of command and control stuff coming down. Yeah, that's one of the downsides of a product roadmap. You've got to be prepared to burn it. And it could have things like release schedules, which are terrible, and then there's Cyberpunk, and marketing requirements, for example. Okay, so that's what a product roadmap is. It's nothing specific, it's nothing super complicated. It's really what the company, and it's usually done at the executive level, saying this is where we want to go with this. Yeah, so what happens is the product owner will have the relevant part of the product roadmap and be trying to build the business story values, the business values to fit with that product roadmap. Is everyone okay with that? Yes, it will be, Adric. Yeah, the presentation will be put up. Yep. Is everyone okay with the idea of a product roadmap? I've got 5 more slides. I know I'm running really close, but these are good. All right, grooming. You guys know that this is the second step, right? You've done it over and over again. Sprint goal, why do we have it? If we have a sprint goal, and by the way, if you're working in a really hardcore agile sprint team, like agile team, the sprint goal generally is printed and put somewhere on the wall, or it's on the platform that you're using to do your management of your project. It's somewhere, right? Because what you want to do is every time you need to make a decision, you should be looking at what the sprint goal it is and say, does this support the sprint goal? Okay. What is valuable? It tells you what is the most valuable stuff that we need to produce. Determines priority on things. So which is the more important than another. and it also shows progress. Okay, so as the sprint goals evolve, you can actually show that you're making progress towards those goals. Is everyone okay with that? Yep. Everyone okay with the idea of a sprint goal? Perfect. All right. Should be one sentence. Okay, so what should a sprint goal look like? I found this template for a sprint planning meeting on the right here. I thought that was really good. One sentence, concise, and has a purpose, has a why in it. Like, you know, should have a, sorry, I'm jumping ahead, should have a why, like we're doing this to do something. We're doing this to do something, okay? The PBIs should be ready to work on. So they might, if there's one with a dependency, you might have to do something else before you do this one, okay? And it has visibility. In other words, it's printed, it's put in the system, it's up on the wall, it's somewhere, okay? And it's usually a customer outcome. It's nothing to do with the development team. Is everyone okay with that? No, I don't. Okay, so it could be something like, we are going to improve the layout of the website to improve click-through rates by 15%. That's really good because it even has a metric that's measurable, okay? So that one there would have a whole bunch of user stories about changing the layouts and changing the ordering, restructuring the website, for example. Is everyone okay with that? More on, can you explain, Harmony, you mean you want to know more about visibility? Yeah, okay, it's not this is actually not too complicated. It's literally everyone in the team should see this, and they should see it every day. Okay, so when they come in the morning, what's the sprint goal today? And they see it's printed on the wall. I always like the ones where they print them on the wall and put, okay. No, it's not even that complicated. It's literally everyone knows what that goal is. Everyone on the sprint team knows what that goal is. Because if you're not thinking about it, if you're not thinking about that, you might drift off onto a side thing. But if every day you're seeing the goal printed on the wall saying, we're trying to improve the layout of our websites to improve click-through rates, you go, okay, I know what I have to do. I need to really look at, when I'm doing this task, making sure that I do good layout. Does that make sense? Yep, okay, cool. Okay, all right, so that's that. Story point capacity. Remember I said I had that graph, that thing about velocity charts? That was the second chart. So you can see that on the right-hand side here, this is this single team. They've got what looks like 7-day, they must have 5-day sprints. See this 5-day sprints here on the graph on the right-hand side? So this is a velocity chart. It's not a burn down chart. This is a velocity chart. And what happens on each sprint, we write down how many story points we got done. They're using tasks, but we can use the same thing with story points. And we can see roughly we're doing roughly 100. We're averaging out 100. We're trying to get done. See how it works for the velocity chart? And I'm hoping that the 10th of March is the current one. How much does the waterfall? I honestly don't think that if you take the entire project, that's a good question. Someone just asked, how does the waterfall system or the agile system affect the time taken to release the product updates? Games like Fortnite get frequent feature updates, but others like Overwatch take longer to release updates. Is it because they're using waterfall instead of agile? That could be true. I can't speak for the people who do Overwatch. So I'm not 100% convinced that Agile always improves the speed of an outcome. But what it does do is it does improve absolutely for certain, it does build a product the customer is happier with because they've been involved all the way through. If what they want changes, then it adapts with them. As to whether waterfall, I think waterfall and agile, if you have a successful waterfall project and a successful agile project, I think time probably is similar, but there's a lot more failures in waterfall models because you don't get the product the customer needs at the end more often in a waterfall model. Does that make sense? I honestly think waterfall models are really good for big architectural stuff that you know exactly what you're going to build and you can't change it because it's a part of a standard or something like that. And you need a really well-documented, well-structured, and you know that the customers are not going to change it. Sometimes I think waterfall is probably a better option. And agile people will kill me for saying this because they think that agile works for everything. But pragmatically, I think that if you've got an exactly well-known outcome that can't be changed, then waterfall is okay. But I think on most products or projects, agile is better because the customer's needs change quite dynamically as you work on the project. Waterfall is more for things that have already been done. Yeah, it's also if you're rewriting something and you're not going to change it, yeah, I guess so. But I was thinking more of we need to create a federator system. Here is the specification from the open specification for the federator. We know exactly what we have to build. Go build it. Because then you one of the things that Agile, if you think about it, Agile locally optimizes. So what happens is the programmer who's doing this sprint is going, I need to build a database. So if you take the student record system, right? There's no one going in and saying, we need to create this well-crafted, huge database to store everything in these sort of cases. What they're doing is, oh, we need a table to do this. They go generate a table to do this. Then later on comes back and goes, I need a table to do this in another sprint. And what happens, you end up with a poorly structured database if you're not careful. And it comes down to having very good teams that communicate to get that database correct. And also it becomes technical debt because at some point someone has to come back and go, oh crap, we're going to have to refactor this entire database to make it work properly. And then we have to fix all the references to that database. So just to give you an example of how Agile stuff can be a little bit problematic. I'm not saying it's bad. It's actually really good overall, but there are little things that you've got to be very careful about. No, you don't always release an update everywhere, but some people do. Some people say, okay, we've got a sprint, but it depends on the length of your sprint. And then sometimes, I mean, tax office has a section above the idea of a sprint called a release, and a release is like 10 sprints. So they have a release with 10 sprints. Continual feedback from the customer. Yep, exactly. Yep, Nico's right. So the main reason for Agile over Waterfall is continual feedback from the customer, continual engagement. Agile stories and networking could be huge because the connection with the internet provider through the PC. Yes, Waterfall's useless. Yeah, look, there's thousands of scenarios here, and Agile can do all of these, but some things are done better in Agile, some things feel like they can be done better in Waterfall. Yeah, Waterfall's tricky like that. So Nico just said Waterfall can easily give customers what they want, not what they need. I've actually heard someone else say that exact same statement about Waterfall. I can't remember where I saw it though. All right, just quick finish the last slide. The last one is important, and Andy's going to get you to do this in his class, but I've got you to do it in one of the sections today. Is once you've figured out your user goal You figure out what high business value user stories will fit into getting that user goal. And then that becomes your sprint backlog and your sprint backlog items. And inside that, what you want to do is at the end of your sprint planning session, you go through each user story and really talk about what that implies, what you have to do to build it, okay, and what you're going to build to make that work. And each person, these user stories are then assigned to usually one person, but sometimes a couple of people. And that's the process. Is everyone okay with the idea of sprint planning? So we go back to our steps, which was back here. Review a product backlog. Usually the product owner is doing that. Grooming the product backlog, that's the product owner. Generally before the sprint planning session. Decide the goal for this sprint, not spring, okay? What users, and figure out what user stories support that goal. So have a look, go through, okay, the goal for this sprint is improving the click-through rates for our website. What user stories do we have here that will support that goal? And then pull those out. Make sure you only get enough user stories to fill up your sprint velocity, and use the data to estimate what the capabilities of the team to get how many points you can use. And then at the end, what you want to do is walk through each user story with the entire team. Do you know why? Anyone got any ideas why we do that at the end? Sure they're correct? Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else? Sure everyone understands? Yeah, make sure there's a common understanding. Excellent. Everyone's on the same page. Yep. It's also to help essentially what happens at the end of this, each person gets assigned some user stories. If you guys have all talked about it while you're sitting around, it means that that person has some help to begin with, so they don't have to be, they get back to their desk and they said, oh God, how do I start this? By doing this, it kickstarts the whole process, okay? Because someone else who's not involved in that user story might go, oh, I know what I do. I'd use this type of database to do this, or this type of technology to do this. I read this great article on the layout of elements on screens and how to optimize for sales. I'll send it to you. Does that make sense? And so what happens is that just gets everyone kickstarted. So there's not that point where you walk back to your desk and go, oh man, I don't even know how to start this. And you spend half a day just trying to kickstart yourself. I'm sure you've all felt that, right? When you've got something that's really tricky to do and you think, where do I start? If you've already had a discussion with a group of people about what's a good way of approaching it, it'll get you going a lot quicker. So it's more efficient. So the idea of Agile is the entire team supports each other. Okay. Is everyone okay with this so far? I think that's it. Yeah. When a person writes a user story, it could have things missing too. Yep, I've been doing that, Hong. Okay, so I'll dump this recording and I'll upload it to the Discord as usual. Okay, and have fun in the pracs this week, or workshops this week, sorry. And let me know if you've got any questions. All right, sorry for running 10 minutes over, but I did want to get through this because you're doing this week. Hong, yes, I said yes. I do it every week. Yep. Cool. Have a great week, guys. Thanks for coming again. I really appreciate it.